What happens when the Middle East's most powerful military confronts the region's most dangerous regime? For decades, the standoff between Israel and Iran has been described as a shadow war. Covert operations, cyber attacks, assassinations, proxy militias. A conflict fought in the shadows rather than the headlines. But that shadow war is rapidly becoming something far more dangerous, a direct confrontation between two of the most powerful military forces in the Middle East. And once that line is crossed, history tells us it's very difficult to step back. To understand this conflict, you have to start with one simple reality. Iran and Israel view each other as existential threats. Israel sees Iran's nuclear ambitions as a direct threat to its survival. A nuclear-armed Iran would fundamentally change the balance of power in the Middle East. From Israel's perspective, preventing that outcome isn't just strategy, it's necessity. Iran, meanwhile, sees Israel and the United States as hostile powers determined to weaken or overthrow the Islamic Republic. To Tehran, the conflict isn't just about nuclear weapons, it's about regime survival. And when both sides believe their survival is at stake, compromise becomes almost impossible. But here's where things get interesting. Because Iran's real strength has never been its conventional military, it's been its network. Over the past 40 years, Iran has built a regional web of allies and proxy groups stretching across the Middle East. Groups in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen that can apply pressure on Israel and American interests without Iran itself being directly attacked. This strategy has given Iran something incredibly valuable in geopolitics: plausible deniability. When rockets fly from southern Lebanon, Iran can claim it had nothing to do with it. When militias attack American bases in Iraq, Tehran can deny direct involvement. It's warfare at arm's length, and for a long time, it worked. Israel, however, has never accepted this strategy quietly. Over the past decade, Israel has conducted hundreds of covert operations targeting Iranian assets across the region, weapons shipments in Syria, nuclear scientists inside Iran, cyber attacks on Iranian infrastructure. None of it officially acknowledged, but everyone knew it was happening. It was a slow, controlled conflict designed to weaken Iran without triggering full-scale war. The problem with shadow wars is that they have a habit of escalating. All it takes is one strike too far, one assassination too bold, one retaliation too large, and suddenly the careful balance collapses. When that happens, both sides face a dangerous choice: escalate or appear weak. And in Middle Eastern geopolitics, appearing weak can be far more dangerous than escalation. There's another factor that makes this conflict particularly volatile: oil. The Middle East still sits on a huge portion of the world's energy supply, and one narrow waterway controls a massive share of that flow: the Strait of Hormuz. Roughly 1/5 of the world's oil supply passes through this small stretch of water every single day. Iran knows this, which means that in any major confrontation, Iran possesses a powerful economic weapon. Disrupt that shipping lane, and the shockwaves ripple across the global economy almost immediately. Oil prices spike, shipping costs surge, markets panic. Suddenly, a regional conflict becomes a global problem. But the real wild card in all of this is the nuclear question. For years, Western governments tried diplomacy to slow Iran's nuclear program: sanctions, negotiations, agreements. But those efforts have repeatedly collapsed. And as Iran continues enriching uranium, Israel faces a dilemma. Wait too long, and Iran could potentially cross the nuclear threshold. Act too early, and you risk triggering exactly the war you're trying to avoid. It's a strategic paradox with no easy solution. Now add in the United States. Washington officially supports Israel's security, while also trying to prevent a wider regional war. That balancing act is incredibly difficult. Too much support for Israeli military action risks pulling the United States directly into conflict with Iran. Too little support risks undermining one of America's closest allies. It's the geopolitical equivalent of walking a tightrope during a hurricane. And then there's the broader international picture. Russia, China, European powers, all watching closely, because any major instability in the Middle East affects global trade, energy security, and the balance of international power. Conflicts like this rarely stay regional for long. They become global chess games. So what happens next? There are essentially three possible paths. The first is controlled escalation. Both sides exchange strikes, but carefully avoid actions that would trigger a full-scale regional war. The second is diplomatic intervention. International pressure forces some kind of temporary de-escalation, but history suggests these arrangements rarely last long. And the third possibility is the one everyone fears, a cascading regional conflict involving multiple states, militias, and global powers. Once that begins, controlling it becomes incredibly difficult. Because the truth about modern geopolitics is simple. Wars don't always start because leaders want them. Sometimes they start because events spiral beyond anyone's control. And when it comes to Iran and Israel, the margin for error is dangerously small. The world may still call this a regional conflict, but if escalation continues, the consequences will reach far beyond the Middle East. Energy markets, global security, international alliances, all of them could be reshaped by what happens next. And the most worrying part? History suggests that once conflicts like this begin to accelerate, they rarely slow down on their own. And that's where things stand, for now. A fragile balance, a dangerous region, and a conflict that could easily spiral beyond anyone's control. But as always, we'll continue to follow the facts, ignore the noise, and try to understand what's really happening. If you enjoy this kind of calm, rational analysis, consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.